disabling our cameras when we're not speaking and presenting. And also, as you may have just had a notification on there, I was about to ask Nick for this, is we are now recording the webinar. So please bear in mind, obviously, if your camera is active, this may appear in the recorded webinar. We will make the recordings available at the end of the webinar, but you'll need to give us some time to do that, and we will be letting everyone know where the recordings are via the mailing list that you signed up to in order to receive the autumn webinar series. Presentations, likewise, we will be sharing those as well. Next slide, please, Nick. So just a quick Modeshift, just in case you're new to Modeshift. We're a not-for-profit organisation focused around the membership and members, and basically we're owned and operated by members. What does that mean? Well, the Modeshift Management Board are the ones that make the decisions, and they work in local authorities across the country, and it's all around supporting sustainable travel, working with professionals in the industry and the various organisations. So collectively, we're kind of working together. We may each have our individual focuses, but we can certainly come together, collaborate and share best practice, and hopefully do a better job as Team Modeshift as what's being branded around over the last few years. Obviously, part of this is we like to offer opportunities to share best practice, such as this today, and we also run the Modeshift Stars system, which Nick is actually on today, and he will be touching on some of those things that we've been working on with Modeshift Stars, but it's obviously the National Travel Plan Accreditation Scheme. Next slide, please, Nick. So about today, we've got 4 presentations, and what we'll do is we'll kick off the webinar shortly with Faith Coles from the Project Centre, and she's talking about the project they've worked on in Reading. Unfortunately, Reading couldn't attend today, and they do send the apologies, but Faith is here representing both the Project Centre and Reading. We're then going on to Food for Thought, which is Georgia Core from Ealing Council, Livable Streets engagement with Gareth Edwards from the Project Centre, and then we're going to close with Nick Butler from the Modeshift Stars team, and he's kind of bringing everything together, looking at effective travel planning. So obviously we'd like to start the webinar now, so welcome everybody, and we will get underway. It looks like we've got everybody in. Like I say, if you'd like to ask questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If we can keep the chat reserved for questions, that'd be great, and likewise we'll try and make sure that we can fit everybody in. Next slide, please, Nick. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Faith Coles, who is presenting on engaging communities in planning for the future of transport in Reading. Faith, if you'd like to unmute your microphone and camera, there we go. And I'll just check that we're hearing you.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Adam. All good. Cool. I think I've got a slight lag on slides on my side, so if I just sit there not saying anything for a minute while the slides change, that's why. It's like those weird satellite calls you have on the news and stuff. So yeah, thanks. Shall we skip to the next slide, Nick, because that one's just the intro. So yeah, hi everyone. I saw some familiar names pop up when everybody was being admitted, so that's really nice. So I know that a few of you at least know who I am, but for those who don't, I work for Project Centre. So Project Centre is a streetscape design, engineering and landscape architect consultancy, and we are also a new Modeshift partner as of this year, which is very, very exciting. So, you know, we work on designing places for the people that use them. That is our passion, and that's what we enjoy doing. We work with clients throughout London and across the UK, including all the way up in Edinburgh. So yeah, pretty far reaching, some great projects going on and really good experiences. Yeah, like Adam said, sadly colleagues from Reading couldn't join, so I'm trying to represent both Project Centre and Reading for this one. I'll happily sort of field questions onto them after this if there are any relevant questions, but yeah, we'll try and answer questions myself on behalf of the project. So I work in the engagement team in Project Centre. We were founded just over a couple of years ago, our team, and it was just myself and my manager for the first few months. So we started off very small, but in the last 2 years we've grown from a team of 2 to a team of 12. So I think first of all, it's important to say, you know, that shows how much engagement has become an integral part of transport and our industry over the last couple of years, both within our company, because there wasn't an engagement team at all before that, and as well as in the transport industry as a whole. So we've seen a lot of projects emerge over the last couple of years that have had community-led engagement at the heart of them. So yeah, it's a big part now of what we do. Next slide, please, Nick. So I'm going to talk to you for the next 10 to 15 minutes about this project in Reading. So I want to talk about our stakeholder engagement strategy, why Reading decided to take this approach, and sort of what the different elements were, how we made it as inclusive as we possibly could, and looking at choosing the right stakeholders, because they were really integral to driving this with Reading. And then I'll go through a little bit of the results and the next steps. So, I mean, I think this community-led approach is relevant across multiple areas. So this one is, you know, particularly about Reading's development of their new transport strategy. But we've worked on loads of other projects recently where community-led engagement is key to progressing them. So I think, you know, whether you're looking at creating a strategy, working on new infrastructure, or implementing behaviour change projects, getting the community involved early on, getting them on board, achieving buy-in is vital. So yeah, that's why I want to talk about this today. Next slide, please, Nick. So a little bit about Reading. So I appreciate, you know, probably most of you know where Reading is, but you might not know anything or very much about it at all. So I found out a lot about Reading over the last year or so working with them. It's, you know, it's weirdly a town. It's not quite got city status despite its size, but it's on the sort of edge of the London commuter belt, I guess. So it's a busy place. There's a few things that make it special, make it stand out. It's actually got the second biggest economy in the southeast outside of London. But there are more people that commute into Reading every day than commute out, which I thought was quite a staggering figure, because you would think, being so close to London, it's about 20 to 30 minutes on the train into Paddington. You would think there would be a high level of people that would commute out of Reading into London. But actually, yeah, the movement is the other way around. It's got one of the busiest stations outside London. I think fourth busiest outside of London. So you can imagine how many people are moving in and out of that station every day. And they've got excellent bus services. Bus usage in Reading is the third highest across the country outside of London. So they have a good public transport system, but they know that they could make it better. They know that, you know, nothing's perfect. They know that there are issues, and that was partly what they wanted to address in this consultation. So they've got a few targets. Population is growing like it is everywhere. There are targeted development statistics for the next few years. There are all these things they have to combat, where the transport system being good enough to sort of support all of this growth is going to be integral over the next few years. So those are the kind of the underlying reasons for looking forward and doing this transport strategy. So next slide, please, Nick. So a bit of background. So Reading, you know, like most councils, they did already have a working transport strategy that was meant to continue for at least another couple of years, but they got to sort of early 2019 and found that they'd completed pretty much all their objectives, which, you know, is great news. But they had to start thinking about, right, okay, great, what do we do next then? What are we doing looking forward? So they decided to look at their next transport strategy, which would take them into 2036. They also declared a climate emergency last year, like I know many councils did, so that was top of their agenda. And there's a climate change strategy that was being developed alongside it. So they wanted to make sure that they were tying in all these different things and making sure that the transport aims and objectives sat alongside and complemented those for climate change and for carbon reductions, and also to support their future population growth and development targets. So they decided the best way to do this was via the biggest engagement exercise they'd ever done in Reading, and that's where we came in. So next slide, Nick. So a little bit of a timeline just to give you some idea of the progression of this. So Project Centre started working with Reading in July last year, and we started working on their visioning consultation. So basically the engagement with the community that would set the vision for the transport strategy for the next few years. We developed an action plan along the transport themes, and aligned it with the climate change strategy, workplace parking levy work that was going on at the same time, and also the local transport plan for LTP4 that was also being developed. So, you know, we had to make sure that this strategy fitted in with all the other council policies that were going on at the time. Next slide, please, Nick. Hopefully it's coming up for other people.
It has moved on, Faith. I'm not sure what if yours hasn't come through yet.
I can't see it. Not for me. Hopefully everyone can see it. It should be an objective slide. There we go. It's just come through. So yeah, so obviously we wanted to give people a say, but we had to set some boundaries. Because you know what it is, if you just go out there saying, give us your thoughts, open page, people come back with all sorts of random things. So we had to set some boundaries. The comments that came back had to kind of fit within the wider council targets. They had to be achievable, you know, all the usual things that most of you as local authority members will know about, because you have to deal with it every day. So before we went out with the engagement, Reading sat down and they came up with some overarching themes to guide people's responses. So I've put the website address on there if you want to have a look into these themes in a bit more detail. But basically they decided the core themes for setting the objectives of the transport strategy would have to centre around people and places. So looking at, you know, how people move, how they get to places, how they live, supporting healthy lifestyles, which is at the top of, you know, all of our agenda. Obviously active travel, we're all working on trying to increase active travel to help support health and healthy lifestyles, so that was key. Creating a clean and green Reading, so, you know, looking towards their goals of creating a carbon neutral town with great air quality, low emissions, minimal noise pollution, plenty of green spaces. Enabling inclusive growth, that's an important one. So, you know, not only the growth of the economy, but also attracting in more businesses to invest there. So a bit of population growth and also looking at, you know, better businesses, and embracing smart solutions, which we struggled with this one, because part of it is, you know, there's technologies emerging all the time, so there's plenty out there. So part of it was we kind of wanted people to recommend what they thought would be the smart solutions of the future, but also, you know, it's difficult when you haven't quite got there yet. But we thought we had to have something in there about harnessing the technology available at the moment to embrace sort of innovations that would come in the future around transport and air quality and environment. So those are the themes that formed the basis of the engagement with people, and kind of led their comments and their feedback. Next slide, Nick. I'm just going to start talking and hope it comes up for me in a minute. There we go. So the first phase of the engagement was the early engagement. So this is before the transport strategy had been developed or started. We hadn't got any further than developing those rough themes. And then following on from this, there would be the second phase of engagement, which was the consultation on the draft strategy that was written up after everybody gave their feedback. So I'll go on to that a little bit later in the presentation. But yeah, the early engagement ran from July to September 2019. We wanted to give people plenty of time to feedback. There was also a slight extension for the college and the university in Reading, because obviously it did run over the summer holidays. So we wanted both of those, key organisations to be able to feed in as well. So, the aim of the engagement was to get as many people in the borough involved in the future of transport in Reading, encourage them to have their say on the council's 5 themes for achieving a visionary and ambitious future for transport in Reading. So we also wanted to tie into that, just promoting to the public that the next transport strategy and LTP were going to be written with their feedback and with their comments in mind, and will reflect the local context and aspirations. So we wanted to put the message out that, this is a community-led strategy. It's not just the council going off, figuring out what they think the aims and objectives are, and then consulting. So we were starting with the community in mind from the beginning. Next slide. So in order to make the engagement as far-reaching as possible, oh, sorry, next one, Nick. Should be engagement methods.
Yeah, I've got that with a slide with a bus in the top left. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, that's the one.
It should be up for most people.
Thank you. So to make the engagement as far-reaching as possible, we use multiple methods of both promoting that the engagement was happening, and also getting people involved and asking them to have their say. So there's a few visuals there, and then I'm going to run through what these are in the next couple of slides. So if you can skip to the next one, please, Nick. So, we had a project website, the basis of most engagements these days, with an online survey and all the key information about the themes and what Reading were trying to achieve through their transport strategy. To accompany that, we also had hard copy leaflets, which were delivered to every single address in Reading. So, that was a big expense, but we just thought it was key to try and make sure that everybody was aware of the consultation and had been told about it and had the information. We followed that up with other advertising on bus backs, the on-bus screens, Reading Station forecourt, where they've got a massive TV screen. We also did some flyering outside stations to try and catch the commuters as they were sort of coming in and out. And then we had a lot of face-to-face events. So we did 5 evening public drop-in sessions, which were spread across the borough at different locations, 3 focus groups, 3 stakeholder meetings, and then we also did 6 primary workshops, because we wanted to, give young people an opportunity to have a say, because we feel like they're so often missed out of these kind of things. Next slide. So key stakeholders were an important part of gathering feedback in this, especially, Reading, to achieve transport change and investment, they can't act alone. So we had to engage with the neighbouring local authorities, make sure that, Reading's vision was reflected in what they were trying to achieve as well. There's no point in doing something if it ends at the borough boundary and then isn't continued. So had to make sure that it fitted in with what neighbouring authorities were trying to achieve through their transport aims and objectives. We spoke with the Reading Climate Change Group, obviously to align things with what they were doing in terms of their climate change strategy. Reading have a citizens panel, which is a brilliant tool. So it's just people from throughout the borough who have signed up to be involved in engagements and feedback and give their views. So we tapped into this for a couple of the meetings to get views from varied people around the borough in a really focused workshop. We attended an access and disabilities working group. So obviously, access to transport is a big issue. So we wanted to make sure that this was represented. We spoke with local transport operators. Like I said, Reading Station is a very busy station, so we needed to make sure that the views of the train operators were incorporated Reading buses. And then we also wanted specifically to target the local businesses. So we had a key stakeholder meeting specifically aimed at businesses in the smaller town centre area, and then also larger employers out at Green Park, which is a big business park on the edge of Reading, which is currently very dependent on car travel to get there. So one of the key things was, speaking with them about how we could improve active transport to their site. And then, like I mentioned, we spoke with the schools and the university, and included primary schools in workshops following their return in September. So next slide, please. So we wanted engagement to be really inclusive. The aim was to get as much input as many people in the community as possible, and we wanted that to stretch across all areas of the community. So we wanted a wide-reaching, inclusive engagement that encouraged participation from across the whole entire community, not just the usual suspects that you would get. So we used all of these multiple engagement methods to achieve this, and I think we did all right looking at the results. So next slide, please. So in this early engagement, we achieved over 3,500 people engaged with. So it was the highest response to any Reading Borough Council engagement exercise ever. So it was definitely a positive on both their and our opinions. We had a great response from drivers, which, as you all probably know, are often a hard to reach group. So it's easy sometimes to get the people that are already using active travel when you do these kind of things, but it's often difficult to speak to drivers and the people that you actually want to try and change the behaviour of. So we got about 43% of respondents said that they drove most of the time. So I think that was really positive. We had a great response from mobility impaired residents. Redibus, which is Reading's Dial-a-Ride bus service, actually drove their customers to every single drop-in event, so all 5 drop-in events, so that they could have their say throughout the consultation, which was brilliant because we just would not have been able to access that big of an audience otherwise. So yeah, a good response. I think we got a proportionate mix of respondents from people using various transport modes as well, which you'll see in a couple of slides. Next slide, please, Nick. So yeah, we achieved a great response across different age groups. You can see from the graph it was very varied, even with the younger age group, which was really nice to see. And I think we had some people emailing us just saying specifically like, oh, my 16-year-old son wants to reply. Is that okay? Of course, we said yes, but it was brilliant to get interest from those kind of age groups who wouldn't normally be engaged with this kind of thing. I think it was pretty representative for the ethnic population of Reading as well. Looking at the 2011 census, we had quite a good spread of responses across different groups, those who left a response for that question. And I know it's always a bit of an issue with transport consultations getting a good spread across male and female as well, but as you can see, it was pretty much even across both of them, which is really positive. Next slide, please, Nick. And yeah, we had a great geographical spread of responses as well. So one of the key things that I mentioned earlier on that was we wanted with the early engagement to tap into all areas across the borough. We didn't want to get a cluster from the centre, for example, and then kind of miss the people on the outskirts. So I think this map shows response locations and also people's mode of travel, so you can sort of get an idea for the different ways people were travelling who responded. But you can also see that the spread is really, really good across the borough and in the outlying areas where people would be travelling in for work. So we were very happy with that. Next slide, please. So yeah, the outcomes of the early engagement had a really positive response to the transport strategy key themes. About 90% of the people agreed that yes, Reading has got that right and they should be the focus for the next transport strategy. We had some really useful feedback on the topics within the themes and a few suggestions for missing topics. And yeah, there was clear kind of support and buy-in from the residents and the local community for the transport strategy, and also, which was really nice to see, like a big, clear ambition for creating a cleaner Reading. So one of the key things that came out of this was that the respondents wanted to see ambitious targets from the council and bold leadership. You know, there was not the usual kind of backlash to trying to achieve more active travel that we often get with consultations from car drivers, for example, and you know, from businesses who are worried about access to the business. I think everybody on the whole who responded agreed that they wanted to see change and that things had to happen, and that climate strategy goals were really important. So it was nice to get that positive feedback from so many people. Next slide, please, Nick. So following that, Reading did a big review of all the responses and came up with the draft strategy. So as I said before, they had to tie in with the other key strategies that were happening in the council at the time. So they tied the aims and objectives in with what was happening with the climate change strategy and also the overarching LTP. And then put forward a draft document to the community this summer, encouraging further feedback. So we didn't want to just stop with the early engagement. You know, we wanted to make sure that we'd got all that feedback, we'd developed the strategy from it, and then we wanted to put it out again to the residents to say, you know, look, this is what we created with your comments. Is this what you wanted? Is this along the right lines? So that is what has happened over the last few months. Next slide, please, Nick. So we consulted on the draft strategy document from the 4th of May to the 30th of August. So again, I think mainly given the circumstances currently, Reading wanted to give maximum amount of time for people to respond, because obviously the last few months have been pretty weird for everybody. So it was a much longer engagement than it would have usually have been. But I think the key thing for this consultation was it was a second chance for the local community to have their say and to check that the strategy aims and objectives aligned with what they had said in that early engagement last year. It was a first opportunity for Reading, for the council, to see how representative of community views and needs the strategy actually was. So this was a way of them, you know, getting a bit of confirmation that, like, yes, we put together a document that reflects what people want. Next slide, please. So the response to this second consultation was lower, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think often, you know, when you do consultations and engagement, the majority of people that respond are the ones that have issues with what you're consulting on. So sometimes a low response is good. It can show that actually, yeah, most people are happy with it and they don't feel that they need to, you know, write in and respond and ask for things to be changed or complain about things. So yeah, so although it wasn't the 3,500 responses that we had the first time around, it was about 300 to 400. I think that could be a positive. But it still showed the same desire for change and bold decisions from the council. So nothing had changed there. People still wanted, Reading to lead a change in the borough, and thought that the council should not be afraid of setting ambitious targets. So some of the comments that came back were like, yes, this is good, this is looking along the right lines, but actually we want more. We think your targets should be, yeah, a bit higher and a bit more ambitious. Traffic reduction was a strong theme throughout the consultation. So again, kind of aligned with what people had been saying in the early engagement. Another key comment, as you would probably expect, was the draft strategy had been written pre-COVID. So a lot of people were saying, yeah, this is great, but, you know, COVID measures need to be integrated, given that nobody really knows how long this weird situation is going to last. Obviously, there's been an impact on people using public transport through this. So that's one of the key things the council have taken away from this when they're going to be writing their final strategy. Next slide, please. So a few lessons learned, a few things to take away from this. So I think, first of all, like I said in the beginning, this can be applied to anything that we do in transport. So school and workplace travel plans, major schemes, low traffic neighbourhoods. I think, getting this kind of community engagement to help a project become successful is really important and can be applied across the board. One of the key things we found in the early engagement was, we set out to do this visionary, fancy, don't know if that's the right word, but we wanted like a nice shiny smart website. We did all this advertising, came up with all these like lovely resources that we were sending out, sort of leaflets, banners, adverts across all the buses, social media. We did all of that, and yes, I do think it had an impact on the response levels, but actually the most useful feedback, in my mind anyway, were the conversations that we had with people. So, the 2-hour stakeholder meetings, for example, with neighbouring authorities, with businesses, they were more valuable in a way than all of the work that we did on the website and other things. So, yeah, it's not always about the shiny things, the fancy things. It's about the conversations that you have with people. It's about the drop-ins, getting that face-to-face interaction, sitting down with somebody and just having a chat. Redibus driving their customers to our events so that they could sit there and they could tell us about their needs as a mobility impaired person, for example. So I think that was a big lesson with this one. So yeah, think outside the usual process. I mean, as far as I know, this is a pretty revolutionary approach to writing a transport strategy. It may not sound like it, but I don't think that any other council, I may be wrong, so helping to this, I don't think any other council has kind of gone out for consultation before they've put a strategy together. So it was a new process and a new approach, and I think it worked well. People like to be included, even if they don't necessarily agree with what you're doing, they just appreciate being asked. Especially the younger people. We could see like the children in the primary schools absolutely loved having a say in this and loved being included, because they wouldn't normally get asked about this kind of thing. So yeah, try and include people in things, and they will thank you and be grateful for it. Key stakeholders are so important. Like I said, some of the most valuable information we got were from the stakeholder meetings, so make use of your stakeholders where you can. Good analysis is important. We spent a lot of time on the analysis for both consultations, and I think it paid off. So yeah, don't underestimate the time needed to go through the data and have a look at the comments and sort things and find all the different key things coming through from people. And don't be afraid to think big. So the feedback from everyone who responded to both consultations was, yeah, to the council, don't be scared to be ambitious, to think big, to have big targets. Like, people will get behind them. And I think the last one that I've sort of found through this is just people are often more open to change than we think. We get a lot of pushback from people when we try and implement changes around transport. Like, transport affects everybody, and it is a sensitive issue if you try and change the way that people travel, as I'm sure you all know. But yeah, once they kind of get down to the conversations and you talk to people, I think they are often more open to changes than you think originally. You can't please everyone, of course, but if you start out giving people the opportunity to take ownership of a project, then the buy-in is likely to be much greater than if they feel it's been imposed on them. So this is where we feel that hopefully this approach of getting people involved in the beginning is going to be a big asset to Reading and help them take this strategy forwards after it's adopted. So that's pretty much it. If you go to the next slide, Nick, it's my contact details if anyone wants to get in touch. And yeah, any questions? So thanks.
Cool, thank you, Faith. Some super important points there for us all to take forward, I think, particularly around engagement and getting that buy-in from people. I'm sure there's lots of people on this webinar who will have heard stories or even local examples of emergency active travel fund schemes even been taken out after implementation because they've not had that buy-in from the start. And I noticed in there you said you had 90% positive response to the engagement and to the strategy, which is huge. It's massive. If we, as you've made at the end, we think people are resistant to change. But some of the research and stats coming out are showing that actually around 3/4 of people are supportive of emergency active travel fund measures and reducing car use and promoting sustainable alternatives. But those noisy people that are resistant are the ones that get the headlines and the sort of the column inches that say that everyone hates active travel measures. So it's great that you've got such a high response rate, 3,500 people, but also 90% of those supporting the strategy as well. And what I've taken there, the far-reaching engagement as well. So you've done the online, hard copy, adverts, face-to-face, and then all the stakeholders, so the unis, the schools, the businesses. It's all stuff we promote in our training courses that we do, that you've got to get your house in order and engage that community. But one of your final points there, which was great, and it's a direction that Modeshift's starting to head in now, and it's what we've kind of built on as well, is that conversations are absolutely essential. You can put all the stuff out there you want, but unless you actually chat to people and find out what they want, that's not proper consultation. So conversation's absolutely key. Really great stuff. Thank you. Okay, Adam, do we have any questions on the chat function? If anyone does have any questions. Oh, great. There we go.
We do. We've got 2 questions. So like Nick said, if you want to add a question, please just drop it in there now. So the first question is, during engagement, did the leafleting of the whole of Reading provide significant return to justify the cost? Is this something that captured new respondents?
So, I mean, we didn't have a direct question in there, which we probably should have done on review, asking how people found out about the engagement. So the honest answer is I don't know, to be honest, but the drop-in sessions that we did around the borough, I would say 99% of people came along clutching a leaflet saying, I got this through my door. It told me about this drop-in session. This is why we're here. So I think in that sense, the drop-in sessions, we had between 30 to 200 people turning up to various ones. So I think, if you count that across 5 different events, that's quite a good return. And I think, just to kind of cover the inclusivity bit, we thought it was worth it just to make sure that everybody at least was told. So I think, it's a difficult one to quantify. Yes, it is a big expense, but I think if you want to make sure that every single person across the community is aware of something, then still the old-fashioned ways are the best, and something through their door is the best way of letting them know about it. So hopefully that answers that one.
Yep, thank you. I'll take one more, and then I think we need to just keep an eye on time and move into the next presentation, Nick. So this next question is, how do you think local authorities best go, particularly in terms of emergency schemes, from an overarching transport strategy with general, it says, nice points to specific schemes on specific streets? So how do you think local authorities best go, sorry, I'm struggling to read this. Best go from an overarching transport strategy with general nice points to specific schemes on specific streets? That's always a tough one, isn't it? Because I mean, the transport strategy, like they've said, it is overarching. It's widespread measures and objectives. I think there's a lot of time that needs to be spent kind of looking at how those bigger measures are turned into smaller, more specific schemes. Again, through Project Centre, we've worked with a lot of clients that are taking their transport strategy objectives and they're making them into those smaller, more personal schemes. I think part of it is just feeding into all of the data and the information that you've got available. I mean, across the council, there's a wealth of information on the local communities and what's required. Part of it is, I think, like I said in my presentation, not underestimating the data analysis from consultations like this. So, through this, we were asking for quite high level information, but people inevitably said things about their local area. There were a lot of comments on very, very specific areas where, bus routes were felt they could be improved, for example. So I think just making sure that you don't miss these things in data and looking at where people have said, like, I'd like a bus stop on my road, or I'd like this bus route to go around this way, or congestion is really bad at this junction. It's kind of not underestimating the little
things that you get in feedback as well, and using these, maybe setting them aside initially, but then just kind of knowing that you've got them there, and then you can pick them up once you've got your transport objectives in as part of these smaller schemes. So partly that, and again, just more consultation and engagement. There's nothing wrong with going out to people again and saying, you know, we need to do a project around connecting up cycle lanes or something. Can you give us really specific feedback on where you think this could be improved across the borough? So yeah, again, engagement and gathering information is just key to that, I think.
Okay, thank you, Faith. If there are any more questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat or email it to the Modeshift events email address, which will come up at the end of all of these slides, and we can put those to Faith, or of course to Reading Council at the end as well, if there's anything that's for the council to answer. But thanks for Faith. Thanks Faith. That was great. We're going to move on to something a little different now. A bit less, not something you'd normally see in Modeshift presentations, but we're going to look at food deliveries. So we're going to go over to Georgia Core. Hopefully, Georgia, you can unmute yourself and share your camera now, and you'll be able to take on.
I hope you can see and hear me. So good morning, my name is Georgia Core. I'm a transport planner at the London Borough of Ealing, where I work on getting more people travelling actively. So today I'm going to be talking to you, as Nick touched upon, on on-demand food deliveries, and this piece of work was sponsored by the Transport Planning Society, so I was awarded a bursary to undertake this. Next slide, please. So why did I pick this research topic? In short, we are a takeaway loving society, and our love for takeaways is only predicted to grow. So on the right hand side there, we've got the UK's takeaway expenditure. Now, in part, it's believed to be caused by obviously the advent of technology and the app-based kind of growth of on-demand food deliveries, enabling us with a click of a finger to order our takeaway and kind of track the person delivering it to our door. But within the UK, London has been hailed the UK's takeaway capital. In 2016, £1.6 billion was spent on takeaways alone, which is obviously an astronomical amount of money. But while the market's growth is fairly understood, how these journeys translate to in terms of modal choice is quite a bit of a grey area still. Next slide, please. So the only kind of body of research that sought to quantify and reveal how these journeys were made was conducted by TfL back in 2007. And what it revealed was that 92% of London's then 13,000 food delivery riders used motorcycles, while only a very small proportion had cycle riders, which really demonstrates that kind of motors trumped muscles. Next slide, please. So while this data is helpful, it is 10 years or over 10 years out of date now, and since then a lot has changed. So in 2013, a new business model in kind of the on-demand food delivery industry emerged, which the likes of Deliveroo and Uber Eats use. So these new businesses build their own fleet networks, where unlike kind of the traditional models such as that of Just Eat would rely on businesses and establishments themselves to provide their own vehicles. So really kind of this step change theoretically could have posed like a great win for sustainable transport if they were to mandate kind of all of their journeys to be made sustainably. However, I think probably many of us know that that hasn't been the case. So if the market's growth it kind of does occur in line with expectations, and these journeys continue to be delivered by power two-wheelers predominantly, there are not only huge environmental ramifications for London, with an average moped emitting between 82 to 133 milligrams of CO2 per kilometre, but it also does pose kind of that kind of inactivity crisis, kind of contributing factor as well. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to talk to you and provide a quick rundown about what the literature says about on-demand food deliveries and what encourages riders to pick particular transport choices. I'll then go on to talk about how I collected data, outline some of the kind of key findings of how riders travel, why they travel that way, and what could get them to travel more sustainably, before going on to outlining a series of recommendations that we as transport planners and practitioners can enact to encourage these journeys to be made more sustainably. Next slide, please. So in terms of kind of the literature, I wanted to start kind of high level and look at the kind of the macro influencing factors. So to begin with, the gig economy. So food delivery riders work in the gig economy, which is a precarious job market where riders are paid per gig. So in this instance, per delivery drop. And as a result of that, they're classified as self-employed. And then by doing, due to their classification, they're excluded from accessing workers' rights, have to provide their own vehicle from kind of out of their own pocket, are without sick pay. And in terms of kind of sustainable transport initiatives, they lack access to the Cycle to Work scheme, which is obviously a really great scheme that can reduce the cost of purchasing and owning a bike. Next slide, please. And then compounding this, I wanted to think about the prevailing transport norms and culture that riders in London find themselves in. So a couple of years ago, TfL did a survey which revealed that the greatest barrier to cycling in London was kind of safety concerns, with 55% of Londoners saying that they were worried about being involved in a collision. Now, when you factor kind of the lack of sustainable transport initiatives that riders have access to, those that do resonate with this 55% are very, very unlikely then to begin to start cycling, which really kind of puts into kind of perspective the importance of infrastructure. So within London, investment in sustainable transport, particularly kind of segregated cycle lanes, low traffic neighbourhoods and so forth, has slowly but surely kind of been ramped up in the past few years, and cycling numbers are increasing, which is great to see. I probably should note that this research was done in 2019, so it will be interesting to see kind of the outcome and the changes to people's travel behaviour as a result of COVID as well. Next slide, please. And then the final kind of point I wanted to touch upon, I wanted to put myself kind of in the shoes of the food delivery rider and think about the practical considerations that they encounter every day in terms of dictating their transport choice. So in terms of kind of the options they get to select from, so e-bikes are revolutionising the last mile freight delivery sector with their added ability to kind of travel further, but with less physical exertion required. However, whilst they offer this, they are often equal to or more expensive than a powered two-wheeler. And then factoring into kind of going back a little bit in terms of kind of the precarious job market, they have to pay for these vehicles from their own pocket up front. So kind of that cost sensitivity is definitely kind of a factor to bear in mind. However, Deliveroo did their own piece of research, I think 2019, that using kind of courier smartphone data, particularly in cities, which revealed that cyclists were the most efficient transport choice. They attributed this kind of due to the fact that unlike cars and powered two-wheelers that may have to kind of drive around to find a car parking space, cyclists tend to not have to do that. And in areas where there's good cycle parking availability, they get an even greater head start because they can kind of use that time to pedal to their destination, which in terms of kind of food deliveries means technically more gigs. Next slide, please. So while the thought of ordering a takeaway every night was really appealing, I decided against this due to my health. So instead, I opted to go for online surveys. So this was with current and former food delivery riders, and it sought to understand how they travel, why they travel that way, and kind of what are these companies doing to promote sustainable transport, and what could they be doing. I then had 15 semi-structured interviews with some of these riders to kind of delve into a little bit deeper about the intervention section and what can we really do and what is possible. I also wanted to get the view from the companies themselves, but unfortunately none of them were available to comment. So instead, I conducted a desk-based review of the actions they are going to be taking to encourage sustainable transport. Next slide, please. So on to the good stuff, key findings. So 57% of riders that participated in this research said that they do not use sustainable transport versus 43% that deliver sustainably. And with powered two-wheelers being the most popular transport choice at 52%, followed by the bicycle. Next, please. But when I disaggregated this data a little bit further, it actually revealed that 63% of those riders use motors still versus 37% that use their muscles, so active travel. And what this really demonstrates is, linking back to TfL's own research, is that kind of the modal choice has shifted slightly, but not enough. Power two-wheelers are still the dominant transport choice. Next slide, please. So I then wanted to understand kind of the rationale behind what motivates these riders to use their specific transport choice. So you can see on the left-hand side, this is what cyclists said, and those on the right-hand side are what the power two-wheeler riders said. So the main reason why kind of cyclist couriers cycle was due to kind of the inexpensiveness, the kind of cost sensitivity surrounding cycling. And this can really be explained again due to the fact that kind of the precarious job market, but also when you look at the demographics of these riders. So 80% of the riders were between the ages of 18 to 34, which again demonstrates many of them working part-time, demonstrating that kind of not kind of paying for a kind of a really expensive vehicle was the top of their priority. When you contrast this then against the right-hand side of the screen, speed seemed to be the most important factor for power two-wheelers, which demonstrates the connection that these riders are making with kind of speed / earning potential. But kind of thinking about London in itself, we have like a 20 mile per hour speed limit in most places nowadays, if not 30. So kind of the speed there, negligible. I think it kind of plays into kind of the stereotypes. But even saying that, Deliveroo's own research showed that cyclists were the most efficient transport choice in terms of food deliveries. So again, it kind of hints that we have some myth busting to do there. Next slide, please. So I then wanted to understand kind of from the rider's perspective, are companies doing enough to encourage sustainable transport? And in essence, 55% said they're not. So I wanted to understand, okay, what can they be doing then? So the most popular answer was that they should make cycling safer, which again goes on to reveal that kind of some of the riders don't feel that they feel safe to cycle in London, which obviously TfL have picked up on. However, kind of I beg the question of whether or not that's the operator's responsibility. It's probably more the highway authority and the local authority's role. So following that, then the next popular answer was that 29% of riders stated that they would cycle if companies provided e-bikes, demonstrating the connection that these riders are making with the earning potential and kind of the increased potential coverage e-bikes can offer, but also again that the costs probably inhibit adoption of these choice. Next slide, please. So finally, onto what I deem to be the most kind of interesting finding of this study was that Deliveroo has been actively prioritising motorised vehicles such as motorcycles and cars over bicycles since July 2019. Click next, please. And so what they did, they've got in their shift booking system, they introduced something called vehicle priority, which is kind of at the lower end of that screenshot, of which their kind of algorithm called Frank takes into account when allocating shifts. So essentially, those that had a motorised vehicle would be given first dibs, and those that were cycled would be given whatever was left over. So as we can see, 76% of riders and who were cyclists who work for Deliveroo said that they think that their transport choice affects the number of orders that they were offered. Next, please. And this is a detrimental impact. So almost 1 in 5 cyclists that work for Deliveroo, part of this research, as a consequence of vehicle priority, were considering switching to a moped, which really kind of brings to the forefront that an operator's actions can really sway riders' transport choice. Next slide, please. So on to some recommendations. So from the findings, I think there's some clear kind of key highlights that we can try and kind of address and improve. The first being to provide subsidised bicycles. So I think lots of the riders said that e-bikes are just too expensive to buy outright, and this is compounded due to the gig economy, so preventing them from accessing kind of cycle to work scheme and so forth. So one idea would be for the operators to kind of purchase a set of fleet bikes and hire these out kind of free or for a minimal charge, Deliveroo has previously subsidised e-scooters in Camden and Islington, so I beg the question of why bicycles are any different. Another option would be to implement an eco-tax. So Uber, which is Uber Eats' sister company, introduced a clean air fee of 15p per mile for every journey in London. The average journey apparently kind of contributes 45p. So all of these towards kind of supporting sustainable clean air initiatives for these drivers. So could a similar reality be possible across platforms in terms of this industry? And I say across platforms because otherwise consumers could quite simply just switch from Deliveroo to Uber Eats, which would really water down the potential impacts of this intervention. Next slide, please. So following that, I've got some recommendations for policymakers, which includes myself. So the top one would be to kind of prioritise cycle parking. So I'm sure many of us are familiar with a scene at the top right of mopeds outside kind of a high street or town centre. And what we could do is prioritise cycle parking in these areas. And I don't mean that on the pavement, I mean that on the carriageway, which really reinforces the hierarchy of modes within our street setting. Installing cycle parking in our town centres and our high streets is really important, not only kind of trying to give these riders a head start, which Deliveroo's research indicated, but also to encourage other journeys that our residents are making to our high streets to be made sustainably. Another potential recommendation is to strengthen public and private partnerships. So in the context of London, we deliver free cycle training and free Doctor Bike to try and kind of help reduce the maintenance costs for those that do choose to cycle. We should be linking them up with these services along with promoting cycle training to try and help boost confidence of those that may feel that they're lacking there. Next slide, please. So another recommendation for policymakers is to review the planning process. So Westminster City Council have done something really interesting, and I haven't been able to find anything along the same lines anywhere. But what they've done is they've started to leverage the planning process to encourage sustainable transport to be made by these by this industry. So they are only allowing establishments that have got the takeaway land use class to offer takeaways, and this has been spurred on by a number of instances where a cheeky Nando's, very literally, had lots of kind of noise and air pollution complaints due to lots of mopeds congregating outside. So what they've done is they require kind of establishments to be flagged, establishments flagged as problematic, or new establishments who want to offer takeaway status to submit this, they have to get that approved, but they also have to submit a kind of like a management plan as such, showing how they are kind of putting sustainable transport at the top of the agenda to encourage these journeys to be made this way. I think that's a really great step in the right direction, but as I've already just mentioned, this is only applicable to new establishments and those flagged as problematic. So we've still got some way to kind of fix the rest of this issue. And finally, what I believe to be the most important part of this recommendation is to protect riders' employment rights. So I think we must ensure, and this is one for really kind of DFT, central government, ensure all riders have unrestricted access to jobs regardless of their transport mode. Deliveroo's vehicle priority has really kind of shed light to the fact that they're treating these riders as more like employees and self-employed, kind of restricting and controlling their transport mode, which obviously needs to be put an end to, but also kind of it's restricting it kind of in light of kind of favouring unsustainable transport modes. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, this is the first research of its kind that sought to understand what transport food delivery riders use, and this is particularly since kind of the new businesses have emerged since 2013. Power two-wheelers are still the most used transport choice at 52%. So we've come some way since 2007, but not far enough. And a myriad of interconnecting factors influence this, ranging from the high level, so the gig economy, to the prevailing transport norms, through to the infrastructure on the ground, and then the personal choice. Found to be the most striking finding of the study is that Deliveroo has been actively prioritising motors over muscles, and this has led some riders to reconsider their transport choice to switch back to motors. And finally, I outlined a series of recommendations that we as transport planners and practitioners can enact to encourage these journeys to be made sustainably at every hurdle to ensure muscles are prioritised over motors. Thank you. I hope that was interesting, and I look forward to any questions anyone has.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. That was super interesting. After this webinar finishes, I think I'm going to look at setting up a takeaway in Darlington. 11.2 billion forecast to be spent next year on takeaways. I think we're in the wrong industry, maybe. We're really keen to give the next presenter as much time as possible before people may need to leave at 11:30. So we're going to go straight into the next presentation, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end to come back for questions, because I think there might be a few for you as well, Georgia. And we might drop my presentation off if there's no time. So if we're going to roll straight into Gareth now, but please do hang on, and we'll look at some questions at the end as well. So to finish off, we have Gareth Edwards from Project Centre. Gareth, I see you've unmuted already and you're ready to go, so I'll bring your slides up. Over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Gareth Edwards. I am from Project Centre, like my colleague Faith earlier, and I'm working on a Livable Streets project for Tower Hamlets. For those who don't know, it's in the East End of London. Next slide. So Livable Streets is a project that Tower Hamlets put forward. They want to change the way that people move around the borough. They want to prevent vehicles from outside the borough using residential roads to pass through and move the vehicles onto trunk roads. They want also, with this, they want to encourage people to walk and cycle to school, college, work, or for social activities. Started in 2019, so we're into the second year now. This scheme obviously started before any of the sort of COVID restrictions and any of the newer sort of street space schemes or LTN that is going on in sort of neighbouring boroughs. Next slide. So steps to delivering livable streets. Throughout the process of planning, consultation, design, and then finally implementation and construction, we want to put the community at the heart of everything we do. We need to understand what they want, what they think are the issues in their areas where we're working, ask them for the ideas, then build that into workshops, and then our designers can go back and create a sort of preliminary design that we can put out to public consultation. And then finally, with the consultation results, create a detailed design, and then move on to sort of construction and then implementation. Yeah. So next slide, I'll take you through some of these steps in more detail now. So understanding our community, Tower Hamlets is quite a unique community in the East End of London. So to the west, it borders the City of London, the business district, and then it has some very deprived areas within the borough, but also it has, to the south of the borough, it has Canary Wharf and the sort of modern financial district. It also has two of the most famous landmarks probably in the world, with Tower of London and Tower Bridge, just in the western side of the borough. So throughout our early engagement, we really wanted it to be community-led. We needed to understand what residents and businesses of the areas we were working in wanted to see, what changes they wanted to see, what changes they didn't want to see. And we really wanted to just gain the ideas from the community. Throughout the process, we wanted people to be open and honest with us. We didn't want it to be led by particular groups. We wanted to make sure that everyone had their say. Next slide. So after the initial preliminary engagement, we'd move on to workshops where the ideas are being put forward in preliminary engagement will be put onto maps, and the community and those attending could visualize what we wanted to do, so the changes we wanted to take place in the area. These are very much open forums, anyone could attend. Sort of pre-COVID, they would take place in community halls, or we'd visit faith groups. We really wanted to capture everyone in the community and give them an opportunity to sort of have their say and discuss the preliminary designs that we'd put forward. Sort of post-COVID world, we now hold these virtually, which is a challenge, I think. We do probably miss some of the community out, which is a shame, and it's something that I think everyone's sort of trying to work out on how we can make sure that we don't. We can encourage everyone to attend, but with current government restrictions, it is a challenge. So on these forums, we sort of break out into groups, and we set the attendees tasks to answer questions about what they want to see in particular areas, scheme areas. Do they understand what the road closures mean and where the traffic would go, and how they would get, you know, to their property or to college or to work with these changes in their areas. Next, please. As part of this, we also, in some areas of significant importance, we go through detailed co-design. So during the workshops and the preliminary stage, we would ask attendees if they wanted to attend a sort of co-design session. You can read this sort of after, but it's an example of one that took place in Arnold Circus, which is the Boundary Estate, which is the oldest social housing estate in the country. So basically, there's a big roundabout circus in the middle, which is currently a traditional roundabout, but we're going to close it off to vehicles, and we wanted to sort of get the co-design on how the residents and the businesses in the area wanted to imagine that area to look, because it's a very large new public space, and it certainly totally changes the way that the look and the feel of the area will be. We had to hold this online, so we held it through Google Meets, and we had good buy-in from local community. Following the webinar, the details, we put them online and opened it up as an open forum for people to ask Q&As and give some more options, and we're just taking that forward now. Next slide. So consultation, a bit like my colleague Faith touched on in her presentation, really keen on paper copies. Certainly in Tower Hamlets, I think it really does make a difference when people get something through their letterbox. A booklet which explains with detailed maps, and people can understand what the plans are. So throughout all the consultations that we've done so far, we would deliver paper documents with an envelope that people can send back to. We'd also obviously allow people to fill them in online. During the consultation, once the consultation is live, we hold one-to-one sessions with the program team and the designers. So if people have any concerns or questions, they can have sort of a 15-minute, half an hour talk, and they can get talked through in detail what our plans were, and if that, hopefully that would allay any concerns they have. We really encourage local residents to respond. With consultations being online, you do get people, certainly in London, you get people from neighbouring boroughs having their say, and we really want it to weigh heavily on local residents from that area, particular scheme area, to respond. And when we do put together and analyse the responses and put together our report, we weigh it heavily on local responses. Next, please. Implementation. So throughout the process, the schemes of livable streets were broken up into areas. So we're starting to build some schemes now, while we're also still in preliminary engagement on other parts of the borough. So it is tricky to handle sort of the engagement across the borough. So for example, on this one, the pictures show Bethnal Green, which was our earliest, which is the area that we started in, and now we've started to physically construct the changes on the roads there. The the difficulty that we found with sort of construction communications during this process is balancing the ideas of giving them the notification of the road closure and the sort of formal process while maintaining the overall benefits for the wider borough and how this will impact the whole area. We also keen to engage with local emergency services to make sure they're aware of any changes, obviously for their blue light times, and obviously accessibility groups as well. Where possible, we would like to show them the changes in the area, and bring them to site when this is permitted, to show them the changes in the area. The biggest issue with construction is obviously when roads do close, there is that sort of pinch point initially, certainly in the first couple of weeks, where drivers or sat navs or anything don't really fully understand, particularly drivers from outside the borough, that there is a road closure in place. So you do get the initial sort of congestion, which does concern local residents. But on our initial scheme on Old Bethnal Green Road, it seems to have gone quite well, and the traffic seems to have gone back to sort of normal levels. A couple of other challenges I thought of just while we're talking through this. The LTN schemes sort of since COVID do have an effect on livable streets. As I said, livable streets started in 2019, and obviously the street space and LTN schemes of neighbouring boroughs of course have an impact on where vehicles go. So we're keen to sort of build up relationships with neighbouring boroughs, with our communications and our engagement with our residents, and their engagement just across the borough boundary is the same. So they know exactly what's going on both sides of the boundary. That's definitely a work in progress. But I think that's a challenge for across London, with all the new schemes that have sort of rapidly come online in the last 6 months. Next. So just a couple of points alongside the sort of obvious construction changes. We are really keen to have behaviour change in the area and make sure that people change the way they move around the borough. So we've started a couple of sessions with using Dr. Bike to get people to get free bike maintenance. And once the pocket parks and the new planting and vegetation goes in, we're keen on setting up gardening clubs with local schools. There's the famous Columbia Road Flower Market that we're keen to get involved with as well. And it could be a real bringing the community together scheme. We also want to tell some local stories of how residents have changed their behaviour. So we're working with 4 or 5 local residents to see how they've changed the way they take their kids to school or go to work once the schemes are sort of embedded. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Gareth. Again, great to see the importance of engagement coming through there, and really reiterating the point of getting all those different methods and having those conversations. We're not behind time. We've kind of caught up now, so we've got some time for questions. And I think we've got one for Georgia and one for Gareth at the moment. If we go to Adam to ask those questions.
Yep. So, question for Georgia: did you get the impression that Deliveroo were receptive to working with London boroughs? Were they given the option? For example, Kensington, Chelsea tried to engage with them previously to offer bespoke cycle and P2W training for riders and found it hard to get a response.
That's a really interesting question. I hadn't heard about the K&C kind of trying to work with Deliveroo, which is really interesting too, actually, to hear that. Haven't worked with any of the companies using my own kind of local authority hat, but I do know that they've worked with kind of Islington and Camden on the subsidised e-scooter scheme. Perhaps it's just dependent on their priorities, kind of thinking about the vehicle priority they've also introduced. I don't have an exact answer for you. We might even see kind of due to COVID a shift in this. Maybe they will be more receptive given kind of the London-wide and kind of beyond push for active transport.
I'm not sure if we've just lost Adam there. He has got
You
lots
haven't.
of.
I'm just talking to myself. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so a question here. Although, and it's about the riders. So although they can't access the Cycle to Work scheme, they can get the same tax relief as it can go in as a business asset. Obviously, you can't spread the payments like Cycle to Work. Does the fact they can do this need to be publicised more, maybe by offering account support to people working in the gig economy? Is that anything you've encountered?
Really good point. Yes, definitely more needs to be done in terms of kind of highlighting to riders what's available, kind of ranging from the tax relief to cycle training to doctor bike and so forth. I do think it would be good coming from the companies kind of to advertise what it is. I know they do kind of from their own perspective in terms of what kind of insurance options are available for the vehicles, but kind of going beyond that in terms of sustainable transport, I think that should be really highlighted to encourage as many people as possible to choose those options.
Thank you. And then the last one is, why do Deliveroo say they're prioritising P2Ws over cycles?
So they've attributed this due to the kind of, they said that they need improved choice for customers that deliver from restaurants from further afield. But on average, food deliveries are between 2 to 3 miles anyway. And in the context of London in particular, I do question why these can't be made by cycling. Many of these often kind of shorter than the 2 to 3 mile average.
Fantastic. Okay, so question for Gareth. Thank you, Georgia. Gareth, if you could come back on, that would be appreciated. Thank you. So the first one is, did you use a mapping tool for online sessions, and could people draw in it, in inverted commas, or add their comments? I'm aware of commonplace, but is there anything that could use during an online focus group?
Yeah, so we did use a mapping tool where people could draw on it and write their comments. Currently, we are looking at a tool called Bang the Table, which we use through all our forums at the moment, and they have a mapping tool which we could use, which we use, and it's really easy for people to click on and just scroll in, zoom in, and pick what they want to say. It does ask people to put their street name or the first part of their postcode, so we can know that they're from the area that we're talking about.
Great, thank you. And then the next question is, are you able to quantify the number of people taking up cycling walking as a result of improvements? I found this is always a challenge.
Yeah, we haven't had any data yet. Obviously, our first sort of construction scheme went in June, so we're still very much in the construction phase of that. Anecdotally, I think we've all seen a massive increase in cycling since sort of COVID, since lockdown. So once there is data available, it will be really interesting to see what it shows. I know in London there's been a massive increase. I know TfL have done some small data analysis, but nothing specifically for our areas.
Thank you. And then the last question, how important do you find local councillor engagement and the support in delivering the scheme?
Oh, very, very important. Especially, I think councillors get a lot of flack, especially on social media these days, and to keep them on side and to for them to engage with their constituents in their wards is really important. We've used councillors to chair co-design sessions and meetings with sort of residents associations, just to sort of allow us to build those relationships up. There's sort of a way into meeting sort of local stakeholders and local community groups, which is really useful, and also inviting us into sort of places like mosques and especially in Tower Hamlets, where there's a large Bengali community in Bengali community groups. So it's really useful to break down that language barrier as well.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Really appreciate that. And thank you to all of our presenters so far that presented. We're really grateful. That's all the questions. So back to you, Nick.
There is one final presentation that when you receive the slides after, you'll be able to spend more time looking at, but we're gonna absolutely fly through these slides. Modeshift couldn't let a webinar about planning for sustainable travel pass up without talking about Modeshift stars and travel plans. So super quickly, just to go through these slides, and then of course you can come back to us with any questions after. Why do we think there should be a focus on travel plans? Well, effectively, this is our definition that we're now using through all of our training courses, but travel plans are population-wide strategies for travel behaviour change that can be applied to any setting. And we've got broader categories there of education, business and community, but under those, there's all sorts of sites. So we've got early years establishments, schools, universities, colleges, railway stations, stadiums, workplaces, hospitals, that we really can reach a lot of people through effective travel plans. Each individual travel plan has the evidence and rationale to secure further commitment and funding and support for sustainable travel. But the issue that we'll all be aware of is that travel plans are, effective travel plans are effective, but the issue we're aware of is that they're not always effective. There are many, many travel plans out there that never get delivered. They are there more just to tick boxes. We now have the evidence that effective travel plans do work. The image over on the right there is all of the accredited schools in the country at the moment. And between those, they've on average reduced car use by around 27%. And that corresponds with an increase in walking of around 11.6% and an increase in cycling of 59%. We've also got an example from Next PLC, who I believe are on the call today, but at their head office in Leicestershire, they've seen single occupancy car use drop from 79% to 49% over 3 years of delivering their travel plan. So what STARS is all about is switching the emphasis from the development of travel plan documents to actually delivering them as well. And that's what STARS is all about, giving accreditation for those sites that go beyond and actually deliver that plan and achieve that reduction in car use. I think Chris Boardman put it best a few months ago, back in February, when he said, pick a crisis: congestion, obesity, inequality, air pollution, global warming, safety. And I think now we can add pandemics to that as well. Investing in cycling and walking is as close to a silver bullet as you'll get. It really does have a huge impact on all of these issues that we're trying to face. So putting that focus through travel plans can help us achieve that. And the super exciting thing about our industry is Team Modeshift. That's all of us working together to really achieve those objectives. Be it whether you're working on the STARS education scheme or the business scheme or the community scheme. Our infographic on the left there shows all of the people that make up Team Modeshift. And we're from such a wide and varied background, be it geography, transport planning, physical activity, road safety, education. That range of experience and that breadth of knowledge that we have as a collective team mean that we really can achieve these goals together. What we're saying is that we should redress travel planning to make it more personal. It can often feel bad when you're asking an individual to take their car away or give up space outside the house for car parking. But if we make it personal, tell people how travel plans can improve their lives by giving us cleaner air, safer roads, saving them money, and just generally making people healthier. Going back to Gareth's presentation, back to Faith's presentation, engaging people, having those conversations can make it much more personal and achieve that buy-in. We have to achieve that buy-in from people. So what's coming from Modeshift over the next few months? Well, lots of new stuff. We have a brand new STARS system launching in very soon. We've not got an official date, but it's coming very, very soon. That new system will see new accreditation levels come in. So currently we've got the bronze, silver, gold, but you'll see on the picture on the right there, we've got green and platinum that are coming in soon as well. With the new green award, we'll see new national standards. So tweaks to the STARS system mean that a travel plan produced in the system will now produce a national standard travel plan, and we'll be releasing more stuff around that to have us all working in the same direction. We've got more local authorities. We've added lots of new local authorities to STARS Education in the last few months, lots of new local authorities to STARS Business in the last few months. So we really are building up this team Modeshift now to have us all heading in the same direction on travel plans. And that means new businesses working on it, new schools working on it, and in the next few months, hopefully new transport consultancies as well. We've also got new focus. We've got political focus and public focus on sustainable and active travel like we've never had before, and new funding with the Emergency Active Travel Fund, and hopefully very soon more announcements about the rest of the 2 billion for walking and cycling that was announced a few months ago. So never before have we had this focus. We've not had this political support. We've not had the public support. We've not had funding. So we're at a really exciting time for really getting hold of these travel plans and delivering effective travel plans moving forward. So that was a super quick spin through. Please do email over questions after. Our contact details are on there. And that just leaves me to hand back over to Adam to summarise and let you know about the next things we have coming up with the autumn webinar series.
Thank you very much, Nick. And yeah, thank you once again to all the presenters. We're just going to close the webinar now, but as you can see on screen there, we've got the dates for the next webinar. So Friday 23rd, 2 weeks time, same details pretty much. We'll have a separate web link to join that webinar, and we will be emailing out on the Tuesday, Wednesday before that webinar goes out. But it's partnerships to deliver sustainable travel. We've got the Modeshift AGM and the National Sustainable Travel Awards taking place on the 5th of November. So please make sure that you put that date in the diary. It's at 3 p.m. Till 5. And then we're looking at School Streets on 20th of November. And we've also got the National STARS Awards on the 4th of December, not the 4th of November. Bit of a typo in there, so that's fine. And that's for the STARS Awards. Thank you so much for everyone that's come along. We hope that it's been insightful. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email them to the events at modeshift.org.uk. Thank you, Nick, for doing that. Please send them over. Other than that, we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. We hope you're enjoying these. Equally, I'd like to say if you've got any feedback on the webinars, please send them in. Other than that, we're just gonna stop recording the webinar now. And we're going to close the webinar so you can leave in your own time. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.